Alright, so I just got done slip stitching all the way around the facing piece of the placket for the face placket. And the next thing that we need to do is we need to put right sides together. So I have with the right side up for my sleeve piece, I'm going to put my right sides together and pin this open edge along the raw edges together. And just to give you a little bit more room along this edge, we might try stitching at a 1/2 inch as opposed to our 5/8 that we have done before, just because depending on how well you may have rolled that 1/4 inch over and slip stitched that in, you just don't want to have a lot of excess bulk. Ideally with 5/8, your seam should run right along this edge here, but just in case we had some slight errors, let's go ahead and create an underarm seam at a 1/2 inch. Alright, so that, again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run my raw edges right here along the 1/2 inch markings on my throat plate and clear bobbin cover. And I'm going to want to make sure that I back tack at the front and end of this, under this my sleeve seam that will go kind of like on the inside of my arm. Running that raw edge along my 1/2 inch markings, and I'm just going to do a quick back tack and be done with that. Oh, I should have done my stay stitching along the top, but I forgot. So we'll see what I can do here. I might be able to put my stay stitching in after the fact. But what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to press this seam open that we just got done stitching, and then what we're going to want to do is try to do our row of stay stitching along the open edge. Now, if you're running into some problems with doing this circle, let me know and I can try to help you. But what you can do is I'm just going to try to finger press. Kind of like use my nail and really press this seam open, and then I'm going to set with that seam down right underneath of my presser foot, and I'm going to run that raw edge along the inside of my presser foot. So I'm just going to lower my needle, do a quick back tack, and then I'm just going to keep, as I keep going in a circle here, I want to keep that raw edge lined up on my presser foot, and every so often, like when I kind of sew a little bit, just because we're working in a small circle, I'm going to pull that fabric back to the front so that the feed dogs will feed that fabric through into the back. And then I'm going to do that again, pull that fabric to the front, sew maybe about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, and then just keep rotating that this cylinder sleeve around in the circle. And as I approach that seam again, I want to make sure that my seam is pressed open, and then I can just do some overlapping stitches from where I started and raise up my needle and presser foot and go ahead and trim those thread tails. Alright, so I put some stay stitching in. I should have done that before I sewed up that seam, but just so excited about sewing the seam up. I couldn't get enough of it. So what you can do is you can press this seam open, or if you want to just kind of hang on to it or set it off to the side. For now, we're going to be going over to the iron in a little bit. Now what we need to do is we need to take our cuff pieces, and if we pull out our patterns real quick, what we'll see, this is our sleeve piece here. And you can see that along the bottom edge of this sleeve there's some notches, but on the top edge of our French cuff piece we have those notches, and so eventually we're going to be matching these up. Okay, so it's important to know that we have notches at the bottom of the sleeve and at the top of the cuff. Okay, and then we have 5/8 inch seam allowance all the way around the outside, and that's what we're going to go ahead and stitch close. So just wanted to reference that, those markings and notches for matching things up. So you're going to want to make sure that you find those and just kind of identify them. Now this is the piece that I have already fused my interfacing on the back side of, and I can see I have my double notch over here and over here. And so what I want to do is I'm just going to place that with the right side of the fabric up, and then I'm going to find those notches on my other piece of fabric, so like on my facing side of the cuff, and then I can see I have my notches here, and I want to match up those notches along the top, because that's what I'm actually going to sew into the, I'm going to sew those into the sleeve and attach those there, but we're not going to create that seam now. I just want to match those up and just pin those in place to make sure that my raw edges are all lined up. Since this is a square, we shouldn't have too big of problems with all of our matching, but then what we want to do is we're going to go ahead and put our pins in along the edges, making sure that we have our raw edges matched up all the way around. It looks like I'm having a little bit of a skew going on. Maybe I can try to correct that. I want to make sure that it gets down into the corner. Let's see, maybe my fabric just isn't laying as it should along the top. So I'm just going to make sure that my fabric is laying flat and my raw edges are matching up the best that they can. Alright, I'm just going to put a couple pins in on each edge because since we're pretty much creating a seam on the outside edge of this square, it's not going to be too difficult to turn and pivot when we create these seams. So again, what we're doing, we have these edges that have those double notches, right? So what we're doing is we're not sewing along this top edge that has a double notch. We're going to sew down the side, we're going to sew across the bottom, and then we're going to sew back up the other side, leaving these two pieces open. Okay? So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to start on one side and work our way around, making sure that we're lining up our raw edges at those 5/8 inch guidelines on our throat plate and our bobbin cover. So I'm going to do some back stitching at the front, just making sure that my fabric is flat the whole time it's stitching, making sure everything's lined up right along that 5/8 inch mark line. As I approach some of those pins, I'm just going to go ahead and pull those out. And what you can do is you can maybe do a back tack here and then stop with your needle down and turn your fabric. And if you need to go backwards or forwards, you can, hold down your reverse button, back it up, maybe come forward more, and then when you stop you can rotate, and hopefully this raw edge will line up right with 5/8 again. And if that pivot is it's too difficult to eyeball or to estimate, what you can do is you can measure and mark 5/8 inch in, or you can just sew each seam, each line one at a time. Either way, as long as we have 3 seams, that's really all that matters. 3 seam lines, I guess. I'm just stitching along the bottom, making sure my raw edges are lined up with 5/8. Just going to do back tack. Might need to come forward another stitch length, and I'm going to pivot and turn, see where that fabric lines up. I think I need to come maybe one more stitch forward. Oh, I guess I needed to go 2 stitches back. Let's see how that is. There we go. Now I'm lined up at 5/8. Then I can come forward here, running that raw edge along 5/8 again. Alright, and when I get to the end of this seam, I'm going to do some back stitching and be good there. So then I'm just going to raise up my presser foot and trim all these thread tails off. Alright, now what we need to do is we need to turn this to the right side. But we have a lot of extra bulk here, and so what we first need to do is we need to trim off at the corner. So we want to go ahead and use our scissors and literally take a corner triangle piece off. Make sure that you don't cut through those stitch lines that you had put in, because then things will unravel some, or we'll have a hole that forms. And then from this point we want to taper our cut line back. So go ahead and taper that trim line back from the point on each edge. And get it fairly close, and then just taper it back off, and then I can just toss those little scraps away. And then since we do have quite a bit of bulk along this top edge here, let's just go ahead and trim that down, maybe about 1/4 inch away from the stitch line. that seam line there. Okay, then I'm just going to come back and trim this too. Trim up the sides, each side of this cuff to about 1/4 inch. We want to have enough fabric to have something to hang on to while we stitch, but then it's always good to kind of trim out that excess bulk. Okay, so again, I should have this opening at the bottom here where I have my double notches cut out. And then what we want to do is we want to turn this whole thing inside out and then give it a good press. So what you can do is you can put your thumbs into this corner and then push the seam allowances towards the fabric side of the cuff that has the interfacing applied. So just kind of scoot those seam allowances over and then gently kind of poke that inside out with your finger. And then we're going to do that on the same side here. So I'm just going to kind of gently push those seam allowances around and try to poke that back with my finger, and then turn the whole thing to the right side. And then if you want to, if yours isn't quite as pointed, you can take some scissors or the end of your, if you have a pointed or a curved point on your seam ripper cap, sometimes you can use that too. So I'm just going to go in there with my scissors and just very gently push that corner out. And then what I want to do is I want to kind of use my my first finger, my pointer finger, and my thumb, and just kind of roll this edge so that my seam is going to lay right on top. I want that seam to be right along the top edge here. And then I'm going to do that same thing for both of my my side seams, or I guess where things will meet up on that facing, or on that placket opening, which we're not for sure exactly how it's all going to work, but that's where things are going to open up. So kind of these side seam areas here. Just kind of wiggle that back and forth and roll out that side seam, so that it's flush with the edge, and then we're going to go ahead and give this a good press. So I'm going to stop the video. I'm going to press my cuff. I'm going to press my underarm seam of my sleeve that I have assembled, and then we're going to combine these.